Namaste, everyone. On the auspicious occasion of Navaratri, I extend my heartfelt wishes to all of you. May Ma Durga's blessings guide us towards strength, wisdom, and prosperity. Center for Educational and Social Studies, in association with ICFEI Business School, is conducting this unique series dedicated to exploring the timeless wisdom of Bharatiya management, where ancient insights meet contemporary practices. It is my privilege to welcome you all to this third day of the Navratri lecture series. We are truly honored today to have with us our esteemed speaker, Dr. Shankar Rajaraman, who is an MBBS graduate with a postgraduate degree in psychiatry, a researcher in Indian knowledge system, and a Sanskrit poet and translator by passion. He is a recipient of the prestigious Maharshi Badarayan Vyas Samman from the President of India for his contribution to Sanskrit language and literature. His PhD in psychology from the National Institute of Advanced Studies was on a topic that bridged the psychology of self-conscious emotions and Sanskrit poetics. He has penned several original works in Sanskrit. He has also been conferred with the Professor M. Hiriyanna Sanskrit Works Award for the Best Sanskrit Poet of the Year in 2013, the Bannanjay Award in 2017, and the Vagdevi Puraskara in 2021. He has several publications to his credit. He is currently the director, Center for Ancient History and Culture, JAIN University, Bengaluru. He will be talking to us today on the topic, a unique perspective on leadership derived from Indian aesthetics. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Shankarji. I also I also welcome Dr. G.P. Sudhakarji, who has joined us today from the United States. Thank you for joining us today, sir. He leads the Bharatiya Management team at Center for Education and Social Studies. A warm welcome to all the enthusiastic participants who have joined us today and continue to enrich this dialogue with their presence and contributions. Your engagement makes this journey meaningful. A couple of instructions for the participants here. Those who need certificate of attendance to this event, please note that attendance is mandatory for all the sessions. And the lecture now, which will begin, be for 45 minutes, and the question will be taken thereafter. So kindly message the questions in the Q&A box, and we shall take them at the end of the session. Over to you, Dr. Shankar.
Thank you, ma'am. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Prajnarupeణ Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalaspatikakritim Adharam Sarvavidyanam Haigrīvam Upasmaya. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for that introduction. And thanks for sharing the screen too. On behalf of the Center for Ancient History and Culture, JAIN Team to be University, I thank Dr. Bhagya from the Center for Educational and Social Studies. My topic today shall be a unique perspective on leadership from Indian aesthetics. Hope I'm audible. Ma'am, hope I'm audible.
Yeah, yes, sir. You're audible, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you please go to the next slide? This is just an overview of the entire talk. In a way, this is a summary of my talk. And the topic is basically exploring leadership through Sanskrit poetics. Sanskrit poetics is not usually a topic that people take into consideration while studying about leadership. People usually go into specific texts like Bhagavad Gita or Arthashastra, etc. And Sanskrit poetics rarely figures in the literature review. The contents of today's talk, the key themes shall be leadership insights from Indian knowledge systems, and as I just now mentioned, from Sanskrit poetics specifically, and a text which is rarely studied even by Sanskrit scholars, Sanskrit enthusiasts, or Sanskrit aestheticians too. And this text is a text called as Shringar Prakasha by, as many of you know, the polymath king, Bhojaraja. and specifically 4 chapters from his Shringara Prakasha, chapter 18 till chapter 22. Shringara Prakasha is one of the most voluminous texts, or I should say the most voluminous texts of Indian aesthetics, with around 36 chapters. This text has never been translated into any language because of its voluminous nature, and it's indeed a mind probe for those who like to study about literature in general, or about even psychology and leadership, etc., and several other topics. And in these 4 chapters, that is chapters 18 till 18, 19, 20, and 21, Bhoja discusses what I would be further expanding upon, a concept called as Nayaka, fourfold Nayakas. And in my talk, I try to link these fourfold Nayakas with fourfold leadership patterns. So basically, it is connecting fourfold literary protagonists. And when I say Nayakas, what Bhoja means by Nayakas are protagonists of a literary work. And through my talk, I shall try to actually connect the fourfold literary protagonists with 4 types of real world leaders. And as I just mentioned, the sources for my talk shall be, the talk is basically a logical continuity of my PhD thesis, which I did from NIAS, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. And my PhD topic was on a group of emotions called as self-conscious emotions. And I specifically took 3 self-conscious emotions: Asuya, Garva, and Vrida. Asuya standing for jealousy and envy, Garva for pride, and Vrida for shame, guilt, and embarrassment. And my PhD thesis was on these 3 self-conscious emotions. And I specifically looked into Sanskrit aesthetics, and one of the most important texts that I consulted at that time was Bhoja Shringara Prakasha. And my talk today actually follows logically from one of the models I explored for studying self-conscious emotions. Most complicated model that I explored, and the model was derived from Bhoja. And today's talk on leadership is a logical continuation of that third model. And I also work specifically on this topic of leadership under the title of a trait-based model of leadership derived from Bhoja's theory of Nayakas under an IKS Indian Knowledge Systems Samvardhini Yojana project, which I did in 2022 till 2024, in fact. And the textual basis is Shringara Prakasha, as I just pointed out, by Bhoja, 11th century polymath king, with 36 chapters. And also another text, Nayaka Viveka, which I myself composed in versified Sanskrit and self-translated into Sanskrit as part of my IKS project. And this Nayaka Viveka text, which the 4 chapters of Shringara Prakasha. And as part of my project, the objectives of my project was basically to evolve a traits-based leadership model from Bhoja's aesthetics, that is from his Shringara Prakasha, and apply this model to analyze contemporary leaders. Can you go to the next slide, please, ma'am? Yeah. Just a brief literature survey and the lacuna in leadership and IKS studies. Current studies, a literature review, even a casual literature review would indicate that current studies that try to bridge leadership and IKS tend to be limited to specific characters like Rama or Krishna, or to specific texts like the Ramayana or the Arthashastra. So basically specific texts, specific literary characters, and to particular disciplines such as Arthashastra or Indic traditions in general. And it is also found that many of these studies confine themselves to documentation and interpretation, and there is no overarching model of leadership that is applicable across fiction and real life. And that was one of the objectives of my project, in order to evolve an overarching model that is applicable to leaders in general, not just to leaders under the Indian knowledge systems like Rama or Krishna, the usually studied leaders, but also an Indian model that can be applicable to leaders from the past as well as to the present and across fiction and real life. So can we go to the next slide, ma'am? Why is Sanskrit poetics a source for such an overarching model? As I pointed out at the very beginning, literature and poetics are rarely taken into account in leadership studies, and they are often dismissed as fictional. Especially literature is dismissed as fictional without any consequence or without any bearing upon real categories, that is, for understanding categories relevant to everyday life, like leadership. But several scholars, even from the West, have underscored the importance of fictional literature in understanding leaders and leadership. Let us look at the word Nayaka itself. The word Sanskrit word Nayaka comes from the root ni, that is to lead, and it directly translates into the English word leader. Nayaka, Nayati iti Nayaka, the person who leads is Nayaka. But unlike its counterpart in English, the word leader, we find that the word Nayaka has a dual application. While the word leader in English applies usually to real life leaders and is scarcely, if ever, applied to protagonists, literary protagonists, the word Nayaka is applicable equally both to literary protagonists as well as we do here. Means we Indians commonly use the word Nayaka to refer to everyday readers, that is, leaders in everyday parlance, as well as traditionally the word Nayaka has often been used, or it's always used, in fact, to refer to literary protagonists, that is the hero and the corresponding word Nayika for the heroine. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is a definition of the word Nayaka itself. The definition is taken from my own work, Nayaka Viveka, and the verses are composed by me as well as the translation is by me. This borrows from the traditional definition of the word Nayaka, but the traditional definition of Nayaka basically relates Nayaka to a literary work. But I have tried to expand the horizons of the word Nayaka, and my definition is as follows. Kanchid ekam pumartheshu phalikritya visheshatah yatamanas tam uddishya gunai karma prasutibihi aphalapti nayanschagre swasya vyapitaya katham uchyate nayakah tadvan nayikapi avagamyatam. So a character which having specifically made one of the four purusharthas its goal. And what are the purusharthas? I shall be explaining in a moment. Purusharthas is a word which we all have heard, the four purusharthas of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So a Nayaka makes one of these purushartha as his goal. And when I say as his, it is also as her goal. Because tadvan Nayika api avagamyatam. A Nayika must also be understood in the same manner as a Nayaka is understood. So the Nayaka or the Nayika makes the purushartha as his or her goal and directs his efforts towards that goal through traits that give rise to goal-specific actions. So when there is a goal, there are certain goal-specific actions. And in order to achieve the goal and the actions, in order to perform the actions that are necessary to achieve the goal, the Nayaka has a repertoire of traits. And what does the Nayaka further do? He or she takes the narrative forwards by his or her pervasive presence. And such a character is called as Nayaka, the male protagonist, and Nayika, the female protagonist. So a Nayaka or a Nayika has a goal, a Purushartha, and performs certain actions, goal-specific actions. And in order to perform those goal-specific actions, the Nayaka or Nayika has a set of traits, an endowment of traits. So can we go to the next slide? Why is the Nayaka very important in literature? And what is the position of Nayaka in Indian knowledge systems, specifically in the Sahitya Vidya or Alankara Shastra, or Sanskrit aesthetics? The protagonist is important for twofold aims of literature. So let us first understand what are the twofold aims of literature itself. And Abhinav Gupta, a commentator on Bharata's Natya Shastra, in his Abhinav Bharati, uses two words, Preeti and Vyutpatti. Preeti is often understood as Rasananda, the aesthetic pleasure that one gets, or aesthetic delight. We should not call it as pleasure. Pleasure is usually translated as sukha. Aesthetic delight, that is ananda, is can be equated with preeti. So the delight that we get when we read a piece of fiction, when we read poetry, when we watch a drama perform, when we read a drama, all that is under the category of preeti. And that is, we could translate it as entertainment. And then you have something called as Vyutpatti. Vyutpatti refers to education about the fourfold goals of life. That is, about goal appropriate actions and goal inappropriate actions. So what are the fourfold goals? As I already mentioned, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So these are the twofold aims of literature. One is entertainment, the other is education. Entertainment is rasananda, education is vyutpatti about the purusharthas. That is knowledge about the purusharthas, which goals to pursue and through what actions those goals must be pursued. That is vyutpatti. It is not to be understood that preeti and vyutpatti are two different aims, actually. They go together. Preeti, where there is no vyutpatti, there is no possibility of preeti. And where there is a possibility of preeti, there is also a possibility of vyutpatti. That is, characters who do not have a specific goal in life or who are not portrayed as having a purushartha cannot also give rise to delight in the reader. So every character, at least the main character, the primary character, that is the protagonist, should have a particular goal, one of the purusharthas. If the character is shown as not having a particular goal or wavering in his goals, that is, for example, if Rama is shown as pursuing dharma at some time, kama at some other time, artha at some time, and moksha at some time, and not sticking to a particular goal, then such a character will not be able to give rise to rasa also. So entertainment, because the audience, the reader will get confused with respect to the education that is to be provided by the protagonist. The reader cannot decide the educative element that is provided by the protagonist. And this confusion will not allow his mind to settle. And it is said that chitta vishranti, that is the settlement of the mind, is the bedrock of preeti. That is, unless the mind settles, there is no possibility of enjoyment through a work of literature. So if the mind has to settle, all questions about the protagonist's actions must settle. And that is possible only if the protagonist is shown as pursuing a particular goal. And this holds good only with respect to the protagonists, not to the secondary characters. The secondary characters can often be shown as wavering in their goals, but the primary character, the hero, the Nayaka and the Nayika, should not be shown as wavering in their goals, because if they are shown as wavering in their goals, the educative element that is to be garnered through the drama or through the literary work is not garnered by the audience. And therefore, there is no possibility of preeti also, because the audience keeps questioning the motives of the protagonist. So education here basically means actions appropriate to specific goals, which is imparted through a description of actions performed by main characters, specifically the hero. There is this positive injunction starting from Bharata himself, and the positive injunction is against showing the hero as dying. No hero in the Indian tradition, in the Indian literary tradition, Kavya tradition, Alankara tradition, should be shown as dying. Why is this? Many people have tried to answer this question in different ways. According to me, this is because if the hero is the heroine is shown as dying after having toiled his entire life performing certain goal appropriate actions, usually towards dharma, then the audience goes with a message that there is no meaning in having a life goal, since you are anyhow not going to gain it. Just like the hero did not gain it, in spite of striving for the dharma, he finally died. What is the purpose of he died in the hands of the villain? And what is the purpose of all these goals, appropriate actions directed towards dharma, if finally you are anyhow going to fail? And even if you attain, you cannot sustain it. So such a sort of thought should not enter into the mind of the audience. This is the reason why there is a positive injunction against ending a literary work as a tragedy and describing the hero as dying. Why hero? Why not the secondary characters? Because heroes are considered as prototypes. They are ideals. They are actually, heroes are usually not found in real life. And this is because heroes are usually shown as pursuing a single goal preferentially. Single goal, when I say single goal, it is artha, dharma, kama, or moksha. Any one of these goals, they are shown as pursuing preferentially and not wavering in their goals. Because only if they are shown as not wavering in their goals will the audience get the full message of how to pursue a particular purushartha. Not if the character, protagonist, is shown as wavering in his goals. If the protagonist is shown as wavering in their goals, in his or her goals, the audience will not get the full message of how to pursue, what are the upayas through which a particular goal has to be pursued. With respect to the secondary characters are very flexible and therefore they can be shown as wavering in their goals. Usually a secondary character like Parashurama is shown as pursuing dharma at some time, artha at some time, moksha at some other time, etc. And that is okay, because it is not expected that we learn about the purusharthas from the secondary characters, but it is expected that we learn about the purusharthas from the primary characters. So, and as I said, the two are interrelated, Preeti and Vyutpatti. Primary characters who do not adhere to specific life goals will also not provide entertainment. And therefore, there is this interrelationship between Rasa and Purushartha, the interrelationship between Preeti and Vyutpatti. But unfortunately, we keep hearing about Rasananda everywhere. Rasananda is obviously very important, but Vyutpatti is rarely stressed. Vyutpatti is not given the importance that it has to be given. But Vyutpatti and Preeti go together. There is no possibility of Rasananda if there is no possibility of corresponding possibility of Vyutpatti also. Can we go to the next slide? How does and as I told in the beginning itself, the protagonist is important both for Preeti as well as for Vyutpatti. How is the protagonist important for Preeti? This is a slide which I will be elaborating upon later too. But just to give an overview, hero plays a pivotal role in the literary work. This cannot be, this is usually not challenged. Most of us agree that the hero plays a pivotal role in the literary work. And what makes the hero special is an assortment of traits which are very strong and which are very numerous. And why are the traits needed? The traits are needed to facilitate certain actions. Which are those actions? The actions are those actions that are necessary for the accomplishment of certain goals. Which are those goals? The goals of Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. And you have Bhoja dividing characters, protagonists into 4 types. The Artha pursuing Uddhata, the Kama pursuing Lalita, the Dharma pursuing Udatta, and the Moksha pursuing Shanta Nayakas. I will not use the word leader now, but now let us confine to protagonists. And each of them, because of the traits that they have, the numerous traits that they have, and these traits are also very strong, each of them has a very highly evolved sense of I. This highly evolved sense of I or Ahankara is because of the wealth that they contain in the form of the strong and numerous traits. And when we read a work of fiction, when we watch a drama, when we read poetry, what the reader does is to identify momentarily with the highly evolved sense of I, which the main character has. The I of the Ahankara of the Nayaka, the reader identifies himself with the Ahankara of that Nayaka. And the Nayaka has that Ahankara because of the trait endowments. This identification of the reader with the sense of I, which the main character has, leads to the experience of rasa. in Bhoja's, this is how Bhoja explains rasa. He has a different way of explaining rasa than most traditionalists would have. But this is also quite a logical way of understanding the experience of rasa. And this is where the importance of leader in the evocation of rasa is also spelled out. There are also certain traits which I shall be discussing later. But now let us go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, ma'am? Yeah. So what is the sort of education one gets from the protagonist? The education is what life goals to pursue, purusharthas to pursue, and how to pursue them, the upayas to pursue them, and how not to pursue them. This education is got from the Pratinayaka, which is the anti-hero. And this is summarized very beautifully in the Sanskrit saying, Ramadivat vartitavyam na Ravanadivat. One should carry on with one's life like Rama, not like Ravana. And when the adage says you have to carry on with your life in the way Rama did, what it means is you need to pursue dharma through the upayas which Rama used to pursue dharma in his own life. And not like Ravana, not pursue artha and kama without dharma, and not through the upayas through which Ravana pursued, because finally that led to his own destruction. So what are the four Purusharthas? Just a recap of the Purusharthas, because the Purushartha framework is very important to understand Bhoja's model. The four Purusharthas are Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. Artha is the acquisition of socially valued material objects. It is not just material objects, but material objects which are valued socially. Then you have Kama, which is material enjoyment. Then you have Dharma, which is acquisition and enjoyment within an ethical framework. And finally, Moksha, which is, while Artha, Dharma, and Kama belong to the realm of Prakriti, matter, the Moksha in Bhoja's framework belongs to the realm of Purusha, which is the realm beyond matter, the realm of consciousness. And moksha is basically the pursuit of eternal freedom from sorrow. It is not the pursuit of eternal happiness, because in Bhoja's philosophical framework, which he borrows from Sankhya, there is no concept of eternal happiness. There is the concept of eternal freedom from sorrow, not the concept of eternal happiness, because always happiness is associated with the fear of losing that happiness. Therefore, happiness is always tainted by sorrow. Therefore, the pursuit should be for eternal freedom from sorrow rather than for eternal happiness. Can we go to the next slide, please, ma'am? And why is literature privileged in imparting this knowledge of Purusharthas? You have a very interesting observation by Abhinav Gupta in his Abhinav Bharati. This commentary occurs in the very first chapter of Bharata's Natya Shastra. And he says that drama, and when he says drama, you should also understand kavya, literature in general, teaches us about the positive or negative consequences of our actions in a matter of few hours or days. In the real world, we need to live an entire life in order to realize the consequences of our past actions. It is also quite possible that the implications of our past actions remain a mystery to us even at the moment of our death. We may not understand what were the implications of several of our past actions. But drama teaches us within few hours, we know that this person performed certain good action in the first scene of the drama. In the last scene, he got awarded for that good action which he performed in the first scene. Such a sort of learning is not possible in real life. But drama gives us this learning within a matter of few hours. Or in ancient days, dramas used to be performed for several days also. So within matter of several days or few hours, we get this knowledge of what are the consequences of our actions. So drama provides definite answers to people whose everyday lives are characterized by uncertainty as regards the future impact of current actions. And such sort of knowledge of Purusharthas can only be got through literature in Abhinav Gupta's observation. Can we go to the next slide, please, ma'am? So let us, this is just a metro analogy I came up with to understand the four Purusharthas. So let us imagine a crowded metro train where everyone wants a seat. But their reasons differ based on their core life goal or purushartha. Many of us travel by metro, and therefore I thought that this is an interesting analogy to understand the four purusharthas. This everyday scenario mirrors how people pursue artha, kama, dharma, or moksha. You have an artha-focused traveler who sees the seat as a valuable asset to claim and hold. We see several such travelers. They stretch out and take extra space, even if it annoys the neighbors. The neighbors have to sit in a crammed place. They have to constrict their limbs and sit. It will annoy the neighbors. And this can also spark arguments, like when they refuse to budge for someone in need. And it's all about securing what's mine. So the seat is regarded as a very valuable asset to claim. And you have to claim as much possibility of as much seat as possible. You have to stretch out and claim as much seat as possible. Then you have the kama focused traveler, views the seat as a source of comfort and enjoyment. You could picture a tired office worker after a long day, and they sink into that seat for relaxation which it brings. Suppose there is an elderly person who boards. Even a kama focused traveler might hesitate to give up. Obviously, the artha focused traveler will not give up, but the kama focused traveler also might not give up his pace because he wants to relax after a tired day, and he prioritizes his own pleasure. And this again can lead to conflicts. For example, conflicts with that old man. Here, the artha focused traveler has conflicts not just with the old man, but also with his neighbors. Then you have the dharma focused traveler. The dharma focused traveler prioritizes what's right over personal gain. So such a traveler quickly offers a seat to the elderly person, thinking this elderly person needs it more. So ethics guides them, and this fosters harmony, but at at their own expense. That is, they cannot enjoy this place, but that is a small price that they are willing to pay for the punya that they get. So they are mainly aiming at punya that they get by leaving the place for a person who needs it more. Obviously, the chance of interpersonal disturbances between the dharma focused traveler and others is quite less. And then you have a moksha focused traveler, and picture a traveler who is just standing there, doesn't want to get into the race at all, rat race at all. He's not in a hurry to have a seat at all. He just wants to enjoy the ride. He just wants to glance through the window and look at the scenery. He is content standing, enjoying the freedom from attachment. There is no stress, no fight, and it is liberation in action. So can we go into the next slide, please? In fact, I had selected, I had also put a few images with the previous slides. Somehow those have not come here. But that apart, let us go further into the discussion. How do we connect Purusharthas with Nayakas? So what Bhoja does is, he places the Purusharthas on a hierarchy. With Artha, you can imagine a pyramid with Artha at the very bottom, followed by Kama, followed by Dharma, and followed by Moksha. Artha is lowermost and Moksha is uppermost. The breadth of that pyramid indicates the universe of objects that are pursued by those individuals. So the Artha dominant individual has the largest universe of pursuable objects. Obviously, all these characters, or all these, if you consider them as correlates in real life, all these people pursue certain objects. The Artha dominant individual has the largest universe of pursuable objects, because he is not prevented by any consideration in pursuing those objects. The only consideration is the object has to be socially valued. Understand that the Artha dominant individual looks at objects which are socially valued. And when I say socially valued, he is not using his own prajna. That is why I began the talk with a with the Mangala Shloka to the goddess, where I alluded to Prajna. And as we go from Artha towards Moksha, one of the traits that is absent in the Artha is Prajna, and a trait which is present in higher degrees as we go towards Moksha is Prajna. The Artha dominant individual lacks what is called as Prajna. He uses the world to make decisions for him. He thinks, if the world thinks that this car is valuable, this is what I have to pursue. He does not use his own prajna. That is the only consideration for him when he has to select an object that is worth pursuing from the world. But what is considered as valuable in the world, there is no end to objects that the world considers as valuable. Today, if he considers this model car is valuable, there is always another model which is more valuable than it. So for a moment, when he is able to garner the object which he considers as valued by the world, he always has an underlying sense of fear of losing position. For a moment, when he is able to garner the object which he considers as valued by the society, there is a slight decrease in his feeling, in his tension, in his fear of losing status. This slight loss of tension, momentary loss of tension, is what is interpreted by him as happiness. In fact, the Artha dominant individual doesn't even get a chance to experience actual object, because actual happiness comes from enjoyment of an object. The Artha dominant individual doesn't have the time even to enjoy an object. He is so behind objects that he thinks that getting the object itself, what actually has happened is, when he is able to garner the object, the underlying sense of fear has momentarily reduced. It has abated. That is actually defined by him as happiness. He never has got a chance even to experience real happiness. Then you have the Kama dominant individual. The Kama dominant individual is slightly better than the Artha dominant individual in his degree of prajna. Why? Because often people think that Kama should come below and Artha should come above. But there is a good logic offered by Bhoja. He says the Kama dominant individual is better than Artha dominant individual because of the presence of prajna to a greater degree in the Kama dominant individual. Why? When the Kama dominant individual has to select objects from the real world, how does he select? He does not use the judgment of others. He does not look into the world to decide which object he has to pursue. Rather, he looks at his own previous enjoyment and then decides what object to pursue. For example, if I have experienced happiness by consuming, say, consuming gulab jamun at some point, and later I see the same gulab jamun, I select that gulab jamun because it had given me happiness. It had given me pleasure in my previous encounter. So, to that extent, the Kama dominant individual is better than the Artha dominant individual because he uses his own prajna to decide which object to pursue. Then you have, and therefore, the number of objects that he can pursue is, because it is determined by his own previous experience, the universe is lesser than the universe of the Artha dominant individual. Then you have the Dharma dominant individual. The Dharma dominant individual also gives up the onus of selection to others, but to who is what matters. Like the Artha dominant individual, he also gives onus to others to an extent, but not the complete onus, because Bhoja says that there are three ways in which the Dharma dominant individual uses his prajna to decide which object to pursue in the world. The first is Shastra. He looks up to Shastra as the collective wisdom of wise people in the past, of ethical people in the past. Dharma Shastra is considered by him as a collective experience, documented experience of people from the past, righteous people from the past. So he uses Dharma Shastra as a guide. Then he also uses what is called as Satcharitra. He looks up to people in his surroundings, people who are considered as ethically better than other people, and he follows their actions. He pursues objects which they pursue. And then you have what is called as Avikita Atma Pratyaya. And Avikita Atma Pratyaya refers to one's own conscience. So therefore, it is not that the dharma dominant individual leaves the onus of selection to the world itself, but he also uses his own conscience to decide which object to follow in the universe of objects that is present around us. Then you have the moksha dominant individual. The moksha dominant individual in Bhoja's framework, first of all, he doesn't have too many objects to pursue at all. The only knot that is tying him to real life, tying him to matter, is the knot of ahankara. If he manages to untie this knot, then he has escaped the realm of Prakriti and entered into the realm of Purusha, into the realm of Moksha. But Bhoja makes it a point to say that literature never depicts a mukta. A mukta is a person who is liberated. It always depicts a mumukshu, a person who is aspiring for moksha. Why? Because in literature, everything depends upon actions of the protagonist. A mukta, because he doesn't have any contact with the real world, doesn't do any actions geared towards acquiring objects from the real world. So there is no possibility of depicting a mukta in literature. It is only a mumukshu, like, for example, Ramana Maharshi or Shankaracharya, etc., who can be depicted in drama, especially when when it is understood that they are in the path of pursuing moksha and not attain moksha. So certain actions can be shown. For example, he is searching for a suitable guru like Gaudapada, or he writing certain treatises like the Brahma Sutra Bhashya, etc. So certain actions can be shown. So when Bhoja tells moksha dominant protagonist, what he means is he doesn't mean mukta. He means the mumukshu, the person who is aiming for moksha. And he connects. Where is this ingenuity in Bhoja? The ingenuity is in connecting these four Purusharthas with four different types of Nayakas. No other aesthetician has done this, connecting the Purusharthas with Nayakas. So you have the Artha dominant character, the protagonist called as Uddhata, the Kama dominant protagonist called as Lalita, the Dharma dominant protagonist called as Udatta, and the Moksha dominant protagonist who is called as the Shanta. This is just the tip of the iceberg of Bhoja's theory. We shall go into the details further. Can we go into the next slide, ma'am? How is it that we can apply this particular model which Bhoja used in order to understand fictional leaders for real life leaders? Where is this possibility? The possibility is in the philosophical basis of Bhoja's model. Bhoja makes it amply clear that he has borrowed his model from the Sankhya model of the Trigunas, the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, which most of you must have heard of. So the philosophical basis of Bhoja's theorization is the Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya Darshana, specifically the Trigunas. And he connects the Trigunas with the four Purusharthas and the four Nayakas. So when Bhoja has borrowed this from the Sankhya Darshana, where is the possibility of confining Bhoja's theory only to literature? Because the very Darshana from which he has borrowed, the Sankhya Darshana, did not originate to understand fictional world or the world of literature. The Sankhya Darshana is verily applicable to the empirical world, not to the fictional world. And in fact, Bhoja just uses these literary characters as proxies for real life people. So Bhoja applies the Sankhya framework of the Trigunas in order to understand literary characters, and these literary characters are taken as proxies of real life individuals, at least as proxies of ideal real life individuals. If there is a possibility of ideal real life individual, you have the possibility of the four Nayakas. So the Uddhata who is an Artha dominant individual, Artha dominant protagonist, is dominated by the guna of tamas. Then you have the Lalita Nayaka, who is Kama dominant, and he is basically Rajasic in nature. Then you have the Udatta, who is Dharma dominant, he is Sattvika in nature. And then you have the Shanta, who is Moksha dominant protagonist, who has an excess of Sattva, which is called as Sattvodreka, and he himself is called as Sattvodrikta. So you have the Tamasika, the Rajasika, the Sattvika, and the Sattvodrikta, 4 types of Nayakas. And these are named as Uddhata, Lalita, Udatta, and Shanta, respectively. Each is connected with a particular life goal. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, how did this model evolve? Let me go into a little into my PhD days. And because I told, in the very beginning, I spoke about how this model is a logical continuation of my thesis itself. In my thesis, I looked at 3 different models for understanding mental states, specifically the self-conscious emotions, and 3 self-conscious emotions which I had actually selected: Garva, Asuya, and Rida. Initially, I thought of applying a Western model, a cognitive appraisal model borrowed from contemporary psychology in order to understand these categories from Sanskrit aesthetics. Then somebody suggested to me that I should look for indigenous models and not just borrow model from the West. This is what led me to in the search of 3 different models, and thankfully I was able to tease out 3 different models for understanding mental states. The first model looks at mental states in isolation. It is like looking at a gem in isolation, taking it out of the jewel, taking out a ruby out of the jewel and looking at it in isolation. So the first model is adopted by several Sanskrit aestheticians, and they say that to understand a mental state is to have information about its antecedent stimulus and consequent response. This has been present since the time of Bharata. And Bharata calls the antecedent stimulus as Vibhava and consequent response as Anubhava. So, for example, if I have to understand that my friend is going through an experience of sorrow, obviously I cannot get into the mind of my friend and experience that sorrow firsthand. But Bharata says that you need to have 2 pieces of information. The first piece of information is that I need to know that his father recently expired. That is one piece of information. That is what is called as Vibhava. And the second piece of information is I need to see my friend shedding tears. And that is the second piece of information, which is called as Anubhava. The bhava comes between the Vibhava and the Anubhava. If I have information on these 2 tangible aspects, that is Vibhava and Anubhava, I know that his father is expired and I see him shed tears, I can get information. I can do an Anumana, what we call as Anumana. I can infer something in between the Vibhava and the Anubhava, which is the Bhava. And that Bhava is the Bhava of Shoka. I can infer that my friend is going through an experience of sorrow because I myself, because of these various reasons, and this shedding of tears, I also communicated my own sorrow to others. I know that sorrow is communicated through tears, and I know that sorrow occurs because of the death of a loved one. So bhava is inferred from the vibhava and the anubhava. That is the first model. That is to examine a gem by isolating it from the jewel. The second is based on a particular comment by Abhinavagupta. Abhinavagupta says that mental states never exist in isolation. They are always present in the company of other mental states. So they are meaningful in their dynamic interrelationship with other mental states. Let us take an example. Suppose Parashurama is boasting. Boasting is a particular behavior that arises from the experience of pride. He is boasting that he is a person who killed the Kshatriyas 21 times. Now, this appears to be pride, but along with pride, you can understand that there is also the other mental state of remembrance, because when he says, I am a person who killed Kshatriyas for 21 times, before he can actually experience pride, there is a moment where he is remembering himself having killed the Kshatriyas 21 times. So the pride is preceded by an experience, momentary experience of recollection, which is called, or memory, which is called as smriti, which is another mental state. So what Abhinavgupta says is pride cannot exist, or any other mental state cannot exist in isolation. It always exists in the company of other mental states. So the second model is like examining a gem not by taking it out of the jewel, but as it is embedded in the jewel. So when the ruby is embedded in the jewel, it takes up the sheen of various other gems around it, and it manifests a unique sheen. So this is how a mental state has to be understood. And this connection between the various other mental state, in my thesis, I call it as a mental state signature. And why is it called signature? Because it actually is a signature of the person's life goal itself. And that is the third model. So the third model is the most context sensitive of the three models. The second model, as I told, is about studying the gem as it is embedded. Now, the question is, where is the logic for such an embedment? Why are the gems embedded in particular way? Obvious answer is, the gems obviously didn't come together and did not arrange themselves in a particular way. The logic was there in the mind of the jeweler. Who is the jeweler with respect to a person? What Bhoja says, and this is the third model, the most context sensitive and most most well developed of the models, most complex of the models. Bhoja says that it is personality. The personality is the jeweler which allows various mental states to conglomerate in a particular way, in a particular person. This conglomeration is called as mental state signature in my thesis. And the conglomerations, at least in the case of primary characters, seem to be preserved starting from the beginning till the end of a literary work. The mental state signature of Rama, for example, will be the mental state signature of a dharmic individual, and the mental states that configure will be in accordance with his purushartha, and it will not vary from the first scene till the last scene. But in secondary characters, when a very important event happens in their life, then the mental state signature can change. For example, Parashurama's interaction, say, with Rama before, after he broke Shiva's bow and after he breaks Parashurama's own bow, these are completely different. When he is in a quarrelsome mode, his mental state signature is similar to that of an orthodominant individual. When he understands the greatness of Rama, when Rama breaks the Vaishnava bow of Parashurama, then the mental state signature completely transforms into a dharmic individual's mental state signature. So the point I want to make is, the personality allows certain mental states to come together in a particular person, or in my thesis, in a particular character, protagonist. Can we go to the next slide, please, ma'am? So this is just a Ruby analogy. The first is to examine the ruby in isolation. The second is to examine it amidst other gems. The third is the jeweler's logic in the arrangement, and the jeweler here is personality. Can we go into the next slide? So leadership study as a natural fallout of model 3. So the 4 different types of nayakas. The point of this slide is basically to say that the 4 different types of nayakas can be regarded as the literary representations of 4 different leadership patterns. So you have 4 different leaders: the Uddhata type leader, the Lalita, the Udatta, and the Shanta types of leaders. Each maximized for their personality is maximized for the pursuit of a particular goal in isolation of other goals. So as I already told in my first slide, there is a lot of research gap, and we usually study individual characters or texts. But model 3 of Bhoja, which is derived from Bhoja, is an overarching model for understanding leadership across characters and texts, and has been summarized in my text Nayaka Viveka, in the Sanskrit text Nayaka Viveka, which has also been translated by me to English. Can we go into the next slide? Bhoja's model is basically a trait-based model of leadership, and traits can be seen as paraphernalia in the journey towards achieving life goals. So each personality type is endowed with a set of traits Why are these traits needed? The traits are needed for performing certain actions. And why are those actions needed? The actions are specific to certain life goals, for the achievement of certain life goals. So you have a hero personality type with the trait endowment. The trait allow action facilitated by those traits, and those actions lead to the attainment of goal specific objects, or finally through the goal specific objects, it allows the attainment of the specific goal itself. Can we go into the next slide? So you have a hierarchy, as I was describing in one of the early slides itself. So we find that the universe of pursuable objects, you can actually, when you say the artha dominant individual, the universes you can go from less material possession towards more material possession. And in the Indian context, this happens across several lifetimes. You progress from being an artha dominant individual to a kama dominant individual to a dharma dominant individual, and everybody goes to finally becoming a moksha dominant individual. But the travel is across several lifetimes. You go from less material possession to more material possession. It is an unending, and when you say more material possession, there is no end to that. Then you have at kama also, there are degrees. You have degrees of less material enjoyment and more material enjoyment. Then at the level of dharma too, you have less merit and more merit. But at the level of moksha, there is no degrees at all, because what is, after all, the moksha dominant individual pursuing? The moksha dominant individual is pursuing his own self. And when there is a pursuit of own self, first of all, there will be no competition at all. Nobody can compete with you to understand your own self. You have to understand your own self by yourself. So at the level of moksha, there is no competition, and there is only this one object. There you cannot have degrees in the self. You cannot have a lesser self and a higher self. The self is just one self. So you don't have degrees there, unlike with respect to the other purusharthas where we have less merit, more merit, etc. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So you can consider these as various distances that need to be covered. So the artha can be considered as a goal, which for example is traveling 50 kilometers. Kama is 100 kilometers, dharma is 150 kilometers. Then you have moksha, which is 200 kilometers. And the paraphernalia for each of these is different, just as it is when we travel different distances. So we don't take the same paraphernalia when we travel 50 kilometers and the same paraphernalia when we travel 200 kilometers. The paraphernalia are in the form of certain positive traits. Can we go into the next slide?
Sorry to interrupt, Shankarji. So we have to wind the session up. So
yeah, sure, ma'am. Sure. Just in 2-3 minutes, I'll finish it.
thank you.
You have 3 different types of traits which are discussed by Bhoja. You have a commonly shared pool of positive traits, 24 traits. Totally 120 traits are discussed by Bhoja. Then you have a set of unique traits, 8 unique traits for each personality type, that is 8 into 4, 32. And then you have differentiating traits that differentiate one protagonist from the other protagonist. So total of 64 traits. And there is a very important concept of dhairya. Dhairya refers to how each character type responds differently to the same situation. It explains something which is enduring about their personalities, and it is what we could consider as inner steadiness. And this inner steadiness can be also considered as the leader's hallmark, just as it is the hallmark of the protagonist. Can we go on to the next slide? So some examples of traditional characters. For Artha, usually Parashurama, Kama, Udayana, the king Udayana, Dharma, Rama, Moksha, Jimutavahana. And the number of positive traits, as we go from Artha towards Moksha, the number of positive traits increase. The displeasurable mental states are maximum when you are at Artha and minimum when you tend towards Moksha. Similarly, well-being is least at Artha and absolute at the level of the Moksha dominant individual. Next slide. So if we have to consider real life coordinates of the 4 literary protagonists, for the Artha, we could consider a business tycoon. For Kama, say an entertainer, a movie star, a rock star. For Dharma, a political leader, a social reformer. For Moksha, a yogi or a spiritual leader. Can we go into the next slide, please? So this is a list of the 24 traits. All of them are positive, and all the four groups, Uddhata, etc., partake of some of these. And as we move from Artha, the Artha has only shares only 12 to 18 of these traits. The Kama has 18 to 24, while the Dharma and Moksha have all the 24 traits. Because Dharma and Moksha are very difficult to achieve, while Artha is comparatively easier to achieve. Can we go on to the next slide? So this is a comparison between personality traits of Bhoja and the character and personality strengths of Peter and Seligman. Interestingly enough, Peter and Seligman also discuss 24 character traits, and there is a lot of similarity between the lists given by Bhoja and the lists of Peterson and Seligman. Can we go into the next slide? This is a complicated relationship between personality type, life goals, traits, actions, self-identity, well-being, etc. I'll not go into the details for lack of time. Can we go into the next slide? This is a comparison of the four personality types, and you can see that the type of traits are also different. For example, you have social and physical traits with respect to the Artha dominant. The Kama dominant has another group of traits, social, physical plus intellectual. Then you have the Dharma dominant also has the moral traits, and the Moksha dominant also has the spiritual traits. So the nature of traits also differ as we go from the Artha towards the Moksha. Next slide. Interestingly, Bhoja also includes his discussions not just about Nayakas. He is one of the rare aestheticians who also discusses female protagonists under the category of Uddhata, etc. In other words, he says that even female protagonists can actively pursue the four goals and are endowed with traits. In this case, they have 16 commonly shared traits. In the male protagonists, you have 24 traits. And these traits are required for the female for the Nayikas in order to pursue their own goals, which are the same, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Can we go into the next slide? So totally, there are four different types of protagonists. Under each category, you have Nayaka, Upanayaka, Anunayaka, Pratinayaka, etc. And when we calculate the total number of Nayakas, based on this paradigm is 32. In fact, there are other paradigms through which he, in fact, expand the list of Nayakas to several thousands, actually. Can we go on to the next slide? The pervasive nature of life goals. Life goals pervade every aspect of behavior and experience, including speech, dressing, nature of sleep, etc. And all this are discussed by Bhoja. Bhoja says how the sleep of a Artha dominant individual can differ from the sleep of a Dharma dominant individual, how the speech of a Dharma dominant individual differs from the speech of a Artha dominant individual, etc. This is actually a fine tuning of Bharata's model, and I'll not go into the details, but what Bhoja does is all the 49 mental states which Bharata discusses, he says that these 49 mental states are experienced differently by people pursuing different life goals. Can we go into the next slide? There is an influence of personality on speech and dressing. For example, the Uddhata type uses bombastic language, long compounds, harsher sounds, etc. The Udatta types use less showy language, and the language is similar to that of the Vedas. The costume is not gaudy. Can we go into the next slide? He goes into the details of even the syllables that a Dharma dominant individual will repeatedly use when he is speaking. The syllables that are used by a Dharma dominant individual in his speech are different from the syllables that are used by a Artha dominant individual. Next slide. This is my text, Nayaka Viveka, and these are some pages from the text itself. And I will not go into the details. The details were what I explained in my previous slide itself. Can we go into the next slide? So this is these are one of the last few verses of Nayaka Viveka, where I actually summarize my entire theory. And as I said, the theory is taken from Bhoja, but in Bhoja, actually the model, all the elements required for the model are not present in one place. They are scattered here and there, and some of the elements required for completing the model are not present. And I had to look up into allied philosophies like Sankhya philosophy, Nyaya, Mimamsa, etc., in order to bring other elements and complete the model. And that is what I have done here. Can we go into the next slide? This is an AI-aided application of Nayaka Viveka. and just an example of its application to understand Macbeth and Aurobindo. And Bhoja's model is very AI friendly because it actually makes a partition, gives categories very clear cut, number of traits, etc. All those are very clear cut. And using that information, it's very easy to actually classify Nayakas, even literary Nayakas as well as real life leaders, into various categories. Can we go into the next slide? Just this last slide, it's very easily understandable that the Udatta and the Shanta types of leaders, these leadership patterns are representative of sustainable leadership patterns. They promote long-term well-being, ethical responsibility, and reduce consumption. While on the other hand, you have the Udatta and the Lalita type of leaders who embody unsustainable modes. They are characterized by arrogance, overconsumption, etc. Can we go into the next slide? This is just a conclusion, and conclusion is the same as I will not go into the conclusion. It's because this is basically a recap of whatever I told in my talk. And Dhanyavada to the Center for Educational and Social Studies, to Dr. Bhagya GB specifically, and to the online audience who participated in this talk and listened to my whatever little I had to present, and to the various Sanskrit Alankarikas, starting from Bharata, including Abhinav Gupta and Bhoja, Jagannatha, all others, who without whose books I wouldn't be able to come up with such a model or compose my Nayaka Viveka. Thanks a lot.
Dhanyavad, Shankar ji. On behalf of CES and the ICFAI Business School and the participants present here, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for your excellent lecture, Shankar ji. Your perspectives have added great value to this series, especially the metro analogy of Purusharthas, connecting Purushartha and Nayaka, to name a few. So, thank you very much. Dhanyavad.